expand upon your introduction. And then we'll get right into questions for each of you up and down the panel. But we'll reserve the last few minutes of this hour for questions from you in the audience. So please have them in mind, and we'll turn to you toward the end of the session. So for introductions, let me start with Josh Bixler to my left. He's president of Flight Test. Welcome, Josh, to CES. To his left is Abby Spiker Carroll. She's CEO and co-founder of Dart Drones. Welcome, Abby. To her left is Hannah Geis, who's Government Affairs Representative of the Academy of Model Aeronautics, or AMA. And to your left is Danielle Corbett, who's with the Federal Aviation Administration. Welcome to all of you. Josh, let me go back to you and give you a minute or so to expand upon your background and your involvement in drones.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm honored to run a company called Flight Test, and what Flight Test does is we use aviation as a tool through video content, through educational, through outreach programs, and also we manufacture products to get people to be able to overcome hurdles and getting into this great hobby. A lot of times people picture drones as something that, maybe like a Phantom or something very advanced. We really focus on the ground level, the roots, the foundation, where we teach people how to build, how to fly, the disciplines and physics of flight characteristics themselves, and also components and how they work together. We do this in our video content, so both young and old can kind of get into the hobby together. We also use it socially, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby.
Yes, my name is Abby Spiker, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Dart Drones, a drone training school, and we also do a lot of consulting. So we have instructors who are all manned aviation pilots in 30 cities across the country hosting classes for individuals, and then we do a lot of enterprise training and training for government entities too. So we've trained most of the broadcast news networks, over 300 police and fire departments, and in general just tons and tons of individuals from all different industries trying to get into drones. And we're excited to be here, and we'll also be talking about the AVSI Trusted Operator Program, which is something that we're part of.
I'm Hannah Geis. I work at the Academy of Model Aeronautics. It's the largest model aviation organization in the world. We are a membership organization for people who fly recreational model aircraft and UAS. I work in the Government Affairs Department, so I deal with the regulations and advocacy. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Danielle Corbett. I work for the Federal Aviation Administration, and as Jay said in the last panel, the UAS Integration Office is the front door for all drone-related regulations and policies. I've been in the office for about 4 years. It started out to be a pretty small office, and it's grown quite a bit over the years. So I've had an opportunity to get my hands on a lot of the initiatives that we work on from a regulatory and policy perspective. And I've just taken on a new role of what I'm now calling customer service, to try to help with the relationships between the FAA and our constituency so that we can better work together more efficiently. So that we'll be taking on a more proactive outreach and customer service role there.
Congratulations on your new role.
Thanks.
And I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning, although I was here at the first panel. Doug Johnson with the Consumer Technology Association. So welcome to all of you, and let's dig right in. In fact, Danielle, let's start with what we need to know. Let's start with the rules. And in a sense, we're kind of picking up with what Jay Merkel said toward the end of the previous session when he was talking about new rules applicable to pilots, specifically recreational pilots. So please explain to our audience what has changed and what will be different in 2020.
Sure. So late in 2018, there was a reauthorization language that introduced a new exception for recreational flyers. And basically what that means is if you comply with the provisions of the exception, you don't need to comply with any of the other regulatory parts, and you don't need any additional certifications or authorizations from the FAA to do so. A lot of the language in that exception is similar to what we saw before, but there are some new notable things, including the requirement to get an airspace authorization for controlled airspace, which on its face sounds a little bit more burdensome than the proximity requirement that we previously had. But now that we've enabled LANS, which is our low altitude authorization and notification capability, to issue those airspace authorizations in near real time, it's actually quite easy to accomplish. And the other big change was the introduction of a new knowledge and safety test. That test, as I think Jay was talking about in the last panel, the FAA has already developed the content and questions for that test. And we introduced a cohort that's meeting actually next week to get together with our industry partners to figure out how we can best deliver that content to the public. We recognize that that the FAA is not necessarily the most popular name on the street in drones, and so we see an opportunity to use our industry partners to deliver that content to their members or customers or students if it's a university. So I hope that we see some interesting adoptions of that test where maybe AMA provides it on their website, but maybe a manufacturer provides it on their control panel, or maybe a university can provide it to their students. So we're looking at that as a very good opportunity for us to promote education rather than to test compliance. We're not looking at it as this like hard requirement to make sure that you have the knowledge and competency to fly, but looking at it as an opportunity to educate people through our industry partners, to expand our reach, and to inspire people to want to be part of this community and to remain part of the community and to build that safety culture that we see in Part 107.
So it's a written test.
In that it'll be electronic. It's written in that it's not practical. Yes, there are words and questions. Yes.
One of our panelists in the first session, Skip Fredericks, had an idea or had a comment about, gee, what if there were some sort of flight test involved? Would that be an added benefit? It would certainly be an additional burden of sorts, but
Sure.
Did the FAA actually consider something beyond the written?
Not for the recreational flyers. And for one thing, that would exceed the intent and the straight language of the statute, which is driving these changes. But the recreational flyers is a slightly less complex operation that we were talking about earlier, about beyond visual line of sight and package deliveries. And so we want to enable this industry to sustain itself and to be able to grow and to encourage people to be able to get involved in it. And I think that a practical test for a recreational flyer would be maybe a chilling effect.
Understood. Josh, you certainly have a handle on the excitement related to this technology, the excitement we see in spirit we've certainly heard about in the previous two sessions as well. How would you describe the community that you work with, and what are they interested in? What is their approach to piloting?
Yeah, great question. We're blessed, I think, with the best community of aviation enthusiasts because it starts young and old. These aren't people that just love aviation, but they love using it as a tool. I want you guys to picture, a parent and their child in the basement sharing a memory together, learning about flight, but then going out in their backyard and flying for the first time and having those joys and those challenges overcome together. I also want you guys to picture people that are, in school and don't really like math, don't really like reading, don't really like connecting the curriculum they have to learn with something that fascinates them. Aviation-based STEM is so powerful because you actually are connecting them with a project where they learn to do research. And from that research, they come up with an idea. And from that idea, they come up with something they want to test. And whether it fails or succeeds, they go back to the research. It teaches them how to tackle practical problems in a beautiful way. And we currently have over 3,000 students actively doing that right now, using flight as a tool to do something positive. And then you go to the senior level where people have a social opportunity to share wisdom and experiences with each other and to encourage each other to laugh together. I look at flight as an amazing tool to do something positive in people's lives, also connecting them with careers. I always say make your passion your profession. If you can learn at a young age that I absolutely love flight, and then you can connect the dots to eventually enable them to make a career out of it, I think you're doing a real service, not only for that child, that young person at the time, but also eventually when they become career pilots in the general aviation world.
By the way, when you're talking students, are we talking grade school or?
We're talking K through 12.
K through 12.
The beautiful thing is everyone understands what gravity is, and you can fascinate a young child and teach them that, there's principles of flight out there that you can understand and then you can overcome, even at the age of 5 years old. And by the time they get to 12th grade, they're not only designing, they're not only flying, but they're networking, they're researching, they're communicating their ideas and their findings, and they're pulling other people's findings and bringing it together. And by that time, they're actually not only building and designing aircraft that they can fly recreational, but they're taking today's technology and they're bringing those into those platforms. We start very simple. We have a plane that we love called the Tiny Trainer, and the Tiny Trainer is a little bit over 250 grams, but it's about 11 pieces of what you go to the craft store and find out a foam board. But that little tiny airplane teaches them everything they need to know about the physics and principles of flight. And from that point, it's a stepping stone that takes them on the next step and the next step. And we have thousands of these planes being built, not only in schools, but in homes and in backyards. And it just kind of ignites a fire saying, oh my gosh, I can take something with my bare hands and I can, overcome the laws of gravity.
Great. Well, Hannah, your organization, AMA, likewise, also has a great handle on the excitement related to drones. But you have a long history, too, going back many decades. Can you tell us a little bit more about AMA's approach to model aircraft flying, piloting, and particularly then back to rules? How have you dealt with this new regulatory structure?
Yeah, so there has been a lot of change in the last few years, especially with the increase of drones. AMA, we've been around for about 8 decades, and so it's not the first time that we've seen change. Our members have been able, they're innovators, so they've been able to adapt and to evolve with the change. I know that every day there's going to be something new, but they've been able to adapt to it. I think it's really important I know like Josh, he has a company just like AMA to kind of tag team there and take these new regulations with an open mind. We want to move the hobby forward, so we're really working on trying to bring new light to it. And I think the new technology that has been available, we've been able to bring new light to our STEM initiatives as well. So, yeah, it's been good.
Thank you. And turning next to Abby, the rules for commercial operators of drones have been in place for a while now. What have been the developments, I guess, beyond the rules, particularly with the program, the Trusted Operator Program of AEVSI that you mentioned? Can you tell us more about that program and maybe why it was created?
Sure. Yeah, so as a group, a lot of people came together with AUVSI, which is one of the largest unmanned associations, and they host a huge conference every year, and they have a lot of great advocacy programs for unmanned pilots. And they came together and brought experts together who said that one of the next things that we need to do in order to progress the industry is to set a set of standards that are based more on flight assessments. So the FAA is not going to hold us to our flight assessment, but I mean, we've had so many people call us and say, oh, I just got my Part 107. Do you know how I turn on my drone? And you're like, oh, okay. So there's a lot of that going on. So this was to try and help move the industry along and set a standard. So the Trusted Operator Program, TOP for short, is different levels and certifications that you could get to show your expertise. So top level 2, there is a flight assessment piece, which is actually really pretty difficult to pass and show that you know what you're doing in terms of actually flying, but also making sure you know where you're allowed to be flying and taking off and having your pre-flight set up, responding in an emergency. So there's all these sort of things that you're tested on in order to get this assessment. So the main 2 goals of the Trusted Operator Program, one was to be able to, if a large enterprise wanted to hire 1,000 pilots in a week, or they needed to grow and have this like huge project. Right now it's like pretty much like a Facebook group that people will be like, I need to hire 1,000 pilots, and everyone's just like, well, I'm great at this, and you have no idea if they know what they're doing or not. So that was a big goal for TOP, is to be able to identify people who have taken the steps to prove that they have the certification. And then another big goal too is for internal programs to be able, a lot of companies were trying to create their own flight assessments, and it actually takes a lot of work and a lot of thought to put this whole flight assessment together. So they were trying to create their own, and they were having these different certifications that didn't mean anything outside of their company. So we've seen a lot of our enterprise clients and contacts adopting TOP, and then having their pilots have a certification that's known outside of their company. So the goal is, I think, for TOP to be just a normal industry certification that's accepted as a drone.
Is it fair to say, though, that it was driven by the enterprise, by the business community, by those who needed pilots but needed to know, like you said, their levels of certification or capability? I mean, it was driven by the market, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely driven by the market. They had over 200 experts, literally talking about it for a year, and it finally started coming together and then launched about a year or 2 ago. So it's slowly rolling out, but as the industry grows and as more companies get stuck needing 1,000 pilots, it's just you can't count on a Facebook group and everyone being like, oh, I took this picture, hire me. So you need something to be able to do that.
Well, turning to Danielle and the FAA, what is the FAA's view of going, I guess, above and beyond the rules in a sense, but creating certification programs and that sort of thing. Is there any, is it analogous to maybe what's happened in manned aviation, or is it just welcome in general by the FAA? Can you describe?
Absolutely, it's absolutely welcome. I mean, any increase in competence is always a good thing. And, you know, with what Abby just said and what DGI was talking about in the last panel about the public safety certification, they didn't use the word certifications, but you know what I mean. It's better for the industry to do that and to create a standard or best practice than for us to try to figure out all the different types of operations and certifications. There's just so many. So we would certainly welcome anyone who's willing to increase their competency, and that just increases safety for everyone. We see that with the public safety side, or the public aircraft operators have a self-certification process. Anything that can help them build their programs or help have them trained to meet their specific mission, absolutely. And I think that best comes from the industry.
Does FAA at any level review these certification programs?
Not per se, but we do, for an example, it could be an element that would help in your waiver request, that you have additional training or you have a certification. So we do take it into consideration in those kinds of ways, but we don't necessarily, we certainly don't prescribe what those or standards should be.
Sure, okay. Josh, turning back to you, well, my seventh grader has watched your channel with enthusiasm and has several questions I will ask you after the session.
Deal.
But for the session, the enthusiasts who watch your YouTube channel, which I think has 1.5 million
Yeah, 1.53 million.
subscribers,
Yes.
could very well be those drone pilots of the future
Yes.
as they progress through school and learn skills. How do you use that YouTube platform in general? Because it's a tool of sorts, I suppose, but it's not your only engagement.
That's beautiful. It absolutely is a tool. We use Flight and YouTube, obviously, to get content out. We oftentimes say entertain, educate, and inspire. We want to, basically give something that families can come together and watch. We want to show an activity they want to repeat, and then we want to inspire them to make that activity their own. So what we do is, through our content, we give nuggets of safety. We give nuggets of knowledge. One day we're gonna make a toilet fly. The next day we're gonna make a battleship fly.
Or a tank or something.
Or a tank, yes, exactly. And we take on these crazy projects to basically kind of push the limits of what flight can do, but then we share with people how we overcome those limits through our content. And
The learnings, and why this didn't fly or why
exactly. We show our failures. The one thing that, I think we're all kind of accustomed to is try to hide the failures, try to hide the hang-ups and the issues. And that's one of the worst things you can do, because, especially in flight, the failures almost accelerate the learning even more, because you can observe what went on, and then you can say, okay, I learned X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to go ahead and try this now. And we make sure in all of our video content that we share that as much as a tool for flight, but also a life lesson to show that, learning and gradually taking what you've brought back and then trying it again is a very positive thing. It's a thing that will benefit you in life and also in aviation. It's kind of a neat thing. Oftentimes people picture pushing the limits with safety getting pushed to the side, and that's absolutely not the case. You can show in a very fun way how the limits of life and also the limits of what you can and can't do can be explored. And we really feel strongly that whether we're in a school, whether we're telling people how to fly in their backyard, how to give best practices. Oftentimes we call ourselves friend on the field. If you went to the field and you wanted to learn how to get in this hobby, who would be that person you would meet and what would they share with you? And we oftentimes try to think of what that conversation would look like, and we weave that into our content. So you're absolutely right when you say that our YouTube channel is a tool. We also make all of our content family friendly, and we think that's very important, because now that educational content, that funny content can be brought right into schools, and it can be absorbed in workshops, summer camps, and many different atmospheres where it's not just good for a laugh and then gone tomorrow, but it's actually a resource people can look back on.
And it seems like you're showing, at least in the videos that I've seen or that my son's shown me, that you've got not only operations in the field, but you're showing what's happening in the workshop before you get outside and try to fly.
Yeah,
right?
we always, everything that we build is built out of simple, common, everyday materials. From day one, we thought flight test needs to be something that helps people overcome boundaries. And at the time, the boundaries was not understanding the technology, and frankly, the hobby was too expensive. Let's go spend 4 months, build a $400 airplane, take it out in our backyard, and promptly break it into 1,000 pieces. Nobody wants that memory. I mean, that's a very difficult thing. So we realized very quickly, if they can learn how to build it, they know how to fix it. If we can identify materials they can get to any day they want from a craft store or a local hobby shop even, that makes it far more accessible. So we use, things we call foam board, barbecue sticks, popsicle sticks, but we never compromise on the experience of flight. By the time these people are done building this, they've learned how to, how an airfoil works, how center of gravity is important, how thrust and angle of attack and stuff all work together. This is really important because this is what gives disciplines early on. So as they grow and say new electronics comes along and new technologies come along or career paths come along, they already are familiar with the technology on a component level, just not here is the finished product, let's go ahead and use it as a tool, which nothing's wrong with that, but we want them to have a deeper knowledge. And so when we go into our schools, and we started about 5 years ago, our STEM program, and we currently have over 3,000 students all over the country and 700 teachers actively teaching. And that's not even counting our homeschoolers or our summer camps. It's such a thrill to know that people can take that in there and they can teach that and how it's going to change their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of our panelists on the first panel actually was referring to the fact that he's taught students from grade school age to retirement how to fly drones for different purposes. Mm-hmm. Hannah, this has been going on for a long time with AMA, out in fields, with the modeling community. Can you talk a little bit more about your structure and your approach to that? And then I'm going to ask you a bit more about community-based organizations on the policy side. But first, what's the experience for somebody wanting to learn, joining a club, and in your organization?
Yeah, so we have clubs all over the nation. So being an AMA member, we have flying sites also across, and so people can form clubs and start these clubs, and a lot of times they teach each other how to fly. That's how they hang out with each other, or they'll bring, if they have sons or children that they want to bring into the hobby to start them to fly, that's how they'll go ahead and do it. We've had, like I said, we've been around for 8 decades, so a lot of times we've had our members who are lifelong. They started when they were 5 and they've been a member until they're 80 or 90 or however, and so a lot of times they work for airlines, or they have this aviation background, or something in them has sparked that they want to be a part of this community, and so they look to AMA to kind of teach them how to go about it and how to fly safely too. I mean, that is one of the biggest things, especially now with all the regulations going on. But we will provide our members with that education and the tools needed to do so.
And apparently insurance too, right?
Mm-hmm, yep, we offer insurance, so it covers, I think it's $1.5 million up to insurance for their drones or UAS model aircraft, however you want to say it, but yeah.
Well, I want to talk about community-based organizations, but maybe, Danielle, I could turn to you just to explain to the audience what that term has meant and what it will mean going forward with respect to drones.
Sure. As Hannah was just saying, it's a group of people who kind of get together and formulate their safety guidelines for the type of operations that they're doing. So like we were talking about the new statute earlier, the exception for recreational operator, I've said it so many times, and that you would think I would have, it doesn't roll off the tongue. It's the exception for limited recreational operation of unmanned aircraft. Actually defines what a community-based organization is, and it has to be a 501c3
For the first time,
and all that
it's
stuff.
defined it, right?
For the first time, it's more defined than it had been before, but in concept, it's a group that's kind of self-defining what it does and formulating guidelines that work for them. But another new element of this statute is that the FAA now must recognize community-based organizations, which we haven't done before. Now, we have a relationship with AMA, and we recognize that, that they have their guidelines and they abide by them. So that's just, in some aspect, it's a new burden on everyone to kind of go through this process. But in another way, it's an opportunity for more players to get in the game and to define what the safety guidelines are for their type of operation. So if it's a quadcopter community versus your model aircraft community. So and they're able to kind of define, like I said, the exception only has 8 provisions. The community-based guidelines kind of helps drive the safety culture for that group of people.
So, Abby, I want to turn to you in a moment with respect to your advice, but before we leave the topic of community-based organizations, I wanted to get more feedback from Hannah and from Josh on how they see that rule from their perspective. Are you ready for it? Does the definition fit? Hannah, I guess first, because we departed from you a moment ago.
Yeah, so AMA has been a community-based organization for a while now, but like Danielle said, they haven't been able to recognize, they haven't done CBO recognition. So that is something that we're looking forward to, is getting that official recognition. Obviously, there are other organizations out there that want that same recognition, but being able to be a CBO, we've been able to do, be a player in the regulations, and especially like with the safety and knowledge test, we were on the board for that, so we helped develop the questions that Danielle also said they're ready to go. We're just going to see how it's going to be rolled out here in the next few weeks. So we've been able to play a key role in that. We're also, we've been able to provide our members with that safety culture. So we have a safety programming, we have education, and when those other organizations want to become CBOs, I think it's really important to make sure that those organizations are able to provide their community with the same knowledge and safety materials that AMA's been providing their members for the last 8 decades, because it's been working. So now we all just need to work together to kind of evolve it with all this new technology and everything.
Thank you. And Josh, what is your view on community-based organizations, and what is needed to support and encourage them going forward?
Yeah, well, the great thing about model aviation is there's so many different facets of it. You could have a soaring community, you could have race drones or race squads, you could have people that fly gas, you could have park flyers in the backyard. It all is very different. And the beautiful thing, I guess, about the CBOs is they can really focus on the demographic that they need to serve and really outline the safety guidelines in the programs to really meet the needs. And the better they can meet the needs, I think the more successful it will be. Flight Test has something called the FTCA. Right here in the U.S., we have 1.53 million worldwide, but right here in the U.S., we have 800,000 active users that we engage with, that we give content to, that engage back with us. We feel it's really important to make sure they're heard, they're represented, but also looking at the age demographic, looking at the activities that they enjoy, the types of planes they fly. We really want to make sure that we custom outline safety guidelines that they can adapt to. Compliance is so important here. If we can't explain something to them that they can accept or they can put into practice, it builds more walls than bridges. And so I'm excited that we're officially, or at least have met the requirements of becoming a CBO. But also I really hope that there's a lot more CBOs that will be developed as well too, because I'm not going to be arrogant to admit that only Hannah and I are the only ones that represent an amazing group of aviation enthusiasts. And as time goes on, I think that's going to help the FAA be better informed, and also as new regulations, hopefully not many new ones, come along, we'll be able to put it into practice in a way that people can comply with, but also digest and buy into.
Well, as your organizations foster that enthusiasm, you may want to start a business. And Abby, that's exactly what you did. You're an entrepreneur and drone operator. So can you talk to us about, I guess, how you got into it, and your advice to those who, with that enthusiasm, with that knowledge, and with this, and the certification and the test and everything, then they want to do something with that drone. They may want to make money. They want to start a business. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so a lot of the people that we work with, we call them drone entrepreneurs. So they're either start by saying that they want to have a career in drones and get hired by a company, or they want to start their own like drone services business. And what we recommend is really, obviously, like starting now, the industry has like progressed a little bit where there are a lot of these drone service providers out there. But we definitely recommend starting sooner than later and then slowly progressing into becoming really advanced in a specific area. So a lot of people, like always, real estate comes to mind, or like wedding photography. Like a lot of people sort of start there, and we try to open their minds and have them start thinking more and more about more advanced inspections, industrial inspections. There's some drone entrepreneurs making a lot of money doing like oil refinery inspections, inspections for mining companies. So as you get more and more and more advanced with what you're offering, you could charge a lot more, and there's way less competition. So that's what we've started working towards, is creating more advanced classes that once someone like has the basics and they've offered their like real estate photography a little bit, then they want to become like an expert at whether it be like inspections or mapping and modeling. So that's what we definitely recommend, is the way to progress and to really like specialize that way. And then a lot of our customers and clients have like found that once you find a really great like sort of gig, like where you're offering your drone services, usually as long as you're doing the job well, they won't switch away from you. So at the beginning, people were always trying to like collect as many clients as they could, and now a lot of our successful alumni have really found like 5 to 10 clients who want them to come back every month and do like consistent work for them, whether it's like a building that's going up and they're going back and creating, collecting data like week after week on the building, or like just something new, some sort of new construction. So that's what we recommend, and a lot of people are very, very happy with their like switch into the drone career. And for the people who want to start their career in drones, we definitely like try to steer them towards becoming a drone service provider, so you could sort of start small and slowly progress and become more of an expert. There will be companies that are hiring drone pilots and will be hiring more and more like full-time drone pilots. Our assumption is that they would probably want to hire someone who's done like X amount of hours and X amount of flights. Like I don't think they're going to be like, oh, like you've never flown a drone, we'll train you for the next 2 years. So that's what we recommend someone start with, is just getting out there and slowly doing more advanced and complicated flights.
Is it the case that most commercial drone pilots are essentially small businesses out on their own, or are they? Is there an organization analogous to Flight Test or AMA where they've brought them together in a certain sort of organization or community, and we provide pilots, for example? So is it an individual course, or are there companies of drone pilots that are out there serving industry sectors and that sort of thing?
I think there's all three of the above. So
They all exist now.
Yeah, definitely individuals who are just getting started and don't have enough clients on their own. Then there's definitely like people who started as individuals and they have a ton of work and they can't do it all themselves, so they've hired 3 to 10 operators to do the work with them. And a lot of our instructors have actually run into that too. Like they're also drone operators and they drone service providers, and they like will sort of actually start hiring some of our alumni, the people in their classes, to then go do the work for them. And then we've seen a big change in who's in our classes. So 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it was a lot of recreational people, and then it started being a lot of service providers, and there's a huge like wave of service providers, and now we're seeing it's a lot more like large enterprise clients, a lot of like government agencies that they're sending people to go and like figure out drone programs. So that's definitely growing from what we've seen, and the service providers are sort of staying steady with who's in the classes for us.
So there's been that evolution on your side, on the commercial side, professional side. What about the evolution on the recreational hobbyist consumer side? I mean, for example, Hannah, has your user base changed? Are there different people showing up at these club meetings? What's been the trend in terms of those wanting to learn how to fly or flying recreationally within your organization?
Yeah, so a lot of our members, they mostly fly traditional model aircraft, but with the introduction of drones, a lot of them want to know more about drones. They want to know how to fly them. So there will be 1 or 2 people in that club that know how to do so, and so they'll ask them if they can teach them how. We do that at our clubs. That is something we want to do, is we want someone to know exactly how to use these drones or UAS to show others and teach others the right way to do so.
So a lot of youth still coming into the programs.
Yeah, a lot of youth. Like I said, a lot of our members are older and they've been doing this for a long time. So there are younger people, and we have partnerships with like JROTC and whatnot, and that want to learn and use these for other purposes.
Thank you. And what are some interesting trends that have happened with Flight Test since you've been at the helm of that organization?
Well, the beautiful thing to your question is the answer is yes. We started out making content for the whole family, so we were engaging simultaneously, young and old alike, parents and children. But also, the reason we got started was because there were so many mysteries into getting into the hobby. So we were really taking on, right from the beginning, what is an electric motor? What is a battery? How do you properly charge it? How do you install that? What is
Kind of demystifying it.
Demystifying, exactly. But also, as FPV came along, we showed how those components work together, how to put them on. So one thing Flight Test celebrates is as new innovations come along, we're really quick to want to be able to bring that into people's worlds and to communicate it properly. And because we've been known about that, it's obviously been very successful. One thing that I'm really excited about is every year we have an event called Flight Fest. And at that event, we have these build tents, and people can come in as a family, young and old alike, and they can walk and they can pick out a project, and there's volunteers ready to help them build it, help them assemble it. And the second it's done, they're out on the flight line, and there's another volunteer ready to help them get that made in flight and then to actively teach them. In the course of that 4 days, we've been able to get about 4 or 5 different generations, from young or old, and aunts, uncles, brothers, cousins. They come back and they do it as a family activity, but the best part is then they go home with that and they continue on that journey. So it's a really rewarding experience to see that. But I love the fact that Flight Test not only hits every demographic, but it also hits every level of technology.
Well, I was about to ask about outreach to more disadvantaged communities, ones that don't get
Yeah.
exposure as much to STEM. It
Yeah.
sounds like some of that is happening already.
Yeah. A matter of fact, in Detroit, we had a program with indoor drones where, a lot of kids, unfortunately, in small inner cities, they don't have a space to fly outside, but they do have a gymnasium. And we worked with the program there to basically bring a drone in and to introduce these kids to something that will spark an interest, because a lot of it was based around, I need to be a rock star in sports, or I need to do this, or else they don't know any other chapters. But what we found really quickly was it was like a universal language of fascination where we could bring that in, and once you got, these children working together, their hunger for understanding how these motors works, how these control boards work, suddenly now you didn't have to tell them they needed to read and how important it was. They knew it was important because they wanted to find that out. We actually had right by my house during an outreach, we went to a school, and there were these 2 young men, 5th grade, that were just constantly bucking heads. We put a plane in between them, and they built a plane together. And I have a picture of them, and they're not looking at each other bucking heads. They were flying together and laughing together. And it was just really cool how, again, going back, it's a tool. It's an amazing tool around an amazing activity.
That's great. That's a great story. And Danielle, is this all happening as FAA had hoped and expected as it continues to assemble the policy framework around drones? Is FAA pleased with what it sees happening in terms of additional professionalism on the commercial side, expansion of clubs and opportunities to learn about drones, learn and appreciate the safety culture? I mean, I assume this is good news to the FAA.
Absolutely. I think the safety culture within the Part 107, or the more professional side, is formed and forming and mimicking, or what we have in the manned aircraft world, not in style, but in concept. And yeah, I mean, the growth of this industry is great, and we're happy to see it. We love aviation, that's why we're here. But it's happening quickly, and so largely it's hard for us to keep up with touching all the people that need to be touched. So I got that was a weird thing to say, but I got a drone for Christmas this year. I opened it up, I was very excited. I got a Mavic Mini, and I love it. But I got that experience of, I'm a pilot, I flew professionally, I work at the UAS integration office, I know a lot about drones, and I just wanted to get out of the box and go fly it.
Do you register your drone already?
Not need to be registered. I think that was an example of a person who could be in those shoes that we need to be able to get information to, and have that information be somewhat obvious, but also the non-obvious information to get it to them in a way that they can consume it. And so what we are pleased with is that the industry is still embracing with us, and that we are hopefully becoming a respected part of that community, and will continue to do so, and that we can pump out information through our industry partners. So I think building that safety culture at a larger scale with the recreational flyers is still, we still have a lot of work to do in that area, but we're looking forward to doing it.
And by the way, since we're at an international trade show, some of your organizations obviously are domestically focused, I assume, or maybe AMA is in Canada too?
We actually have a partnership with Canada. We work with them. We help them develop their regulations and their organization that is similar to AMA.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, in fact, if anybody in the panel wants to respond, but Danielle, I was going to start back with you about the sharing of these experiences or learnings or best practices, particularly in the recreational and hobbyist side, but also the commercial side with respect to pilots. Our FAA continues to liaise with other regulators around the world in these things. Are we on the vanguard of what we are talking about here and sharing that globally, or what's your perspective on the international side?
On the international side? Well, certainly we're trying to, be the leader, and what Jay was talking about earlier is that it makes sense to have a regulatory framework that is, broad in scope so that I can go up to Canada and fly my drone. I can come down here and fly my drone. And, the regulations and the requirements are the same or similar. So we do reach out with, we're definitely on the, on the higher end of complex operations working globally. On the lower end, I mean, we're certainly working closely with Canada. We get a lot of information from them on how they've addressed the recreational flyers, and that helped us inform our test. So things like that. But the way we reach out just kind of more broadly, we just had our Drone Safety Week. That was a national event, but it got international attention, and hopefully will kind of set the standard for us to be able to extend our reach. We were able to get all 50 states to participate in this, and to get a broad variety of our, a lot of our partners work on the international stage too. So I mean, I keep saying the same messages that we're working through our international or our industry partners, but that's how we reach out to the flyer community.
And Abby, certainly people around the world could be doing the same thing and are doing the same thing you have done in starting a company. And maybe there are also certification programs out there that they're working on too. But do you have an international perspective on this, or a network, or what can you say?
Yeah, we've done some pretty cool international training, which is surprising. So it seems like maybe I don't know if they don't have like a set up drone training school in their country or not, but we've done some like really cool ones, especially with like governments of other international governments. But TOP is actually an international program too. So like right now, the 3 training providers in TOP are all approved in the U.S., but the goal for TOP is for it to be an international certification. So there's like a process that if we wanted to get approved in like Australia or something, we would have to go through it to become approved, but that is the goal of TOP,
okay, good.
is to be accepted internationally.
Great. And Josh, certainly anybody can tune into your YouTube channel, for example,
Yes.
around the world. Do you have any sense of the international following of your community, at least online?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, we do get to hit a worldwide audience, and you also mentioned earlier different demographics and different countries and different stages, to be frank with you. And one thing that's really exciting to us is because we use common materials, because we teach people the basics of flight, we see people in countries that could never in 100 years explore model aviation or advanced technology, remote controlled, literally saying, I don't have foam board, I have cardboard, and guess what? It works the same. And they build it, and they get fascinated, and they share their pictures and their experiences, and then some of them even turn it into careers because it is so rare, for someone to have that knowledge. It turns their families around, it turns their lives around, where, again, it goes from a passion to a profession.
So it's likely you're fostering interest around the world.
Yeah, we do something kind of unique. Everything that we design, that we manufacture as a speed build kit, we also give away free plans for. And that's very strategic and on purpose because we don't want there to be, and again, any barriers, whether it's economic means, whether it's time means, for people to be able to enjoy this great hobby and get started in flight. So anything we design, every month we put out a new plan. So every month there's either a new memory that can be had, a new experience someone can have, a new thing that someone will be learning.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the audience for the promised opportunity to ask questions in just a moment. But Danielle, let me just return to the event or campaign that you mentioned. First ever National Drone Safety Awareness Week took place in November, early November, I think certainly before the holiday shopping season. FAA had never done anything like this before. You did it in partnership with parties in the public and private sector across the United States. You going to do it again? What came out of this? What have you learned?
Yeah, absolutely. We hope for this to be an annual event. We consider it a success. The first year we had participation in all 50 states. We had over 125 events that we know of that participated. And we look into this kind of taking a page from the Air Force safety stand-down model, where you take a break for a minute from the operations and the stress over waivers and all the fun and stress that comes with all that, just to focus on the safety part and just to say, hey, let's just sit down and talk about all the safety elements, not just of flight, but there's also other elements, ground safety and all this, as well as being able to engage the communities. We talked a lot about that in the last panel, where community engagement is a necessary element for this industry to continue to grow and be accepted. So we were able to encourage, there was public safety agencies, law enforcement, schools, AMA, AUVSI, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second, who did events like free training, who did events like demonstration flights, and got people out there who might be interested in getting involved in the community to be able to understand what's required of them or what it looks like, and got other community members who may not want to be drone flyers, but just to understand what it is and what it means, so that when you hear the little buzzing, you don't have to put up, your close your blinds and call the police. So we consider it a very big success, and we look forward to doing it again next year.
Was there a particular focus on the younger operators?
Not per se, but that's certainly an important element of this, is STEM programs and young children. And there was a lot of engagement in those fields.
Denny, and AMA, as you mentioned, was part of this too. Do any of you have thoughts or comments on such an annual campaign and good thing? Did you participate? Would you like to see it happen again?
I think it was really successful. I know that AMA, some of our clubs used it as a tool to educate the local law enforcement and have them out on site and use training purposes for that week. And we also had our expo. We have our national expo out in Pomona, California, and that we used that kind of to kick off the week. So it was really successful for us.
Yeah, it encouraged us to participate. We partnered with, I think, like 5 or 6 other like drone companies to offer we have a class on like Lance and AirMap, how to use AirMap, that's online. So we offered that for free, and then our partners also promoted it. So I think it's great to encourage like people to give away free content, free training, just to educate people, because there's so many people who don't realize like that, just like Danielle had said, that you just don't know that you need to be educated on things. You're just flying under an airport and you're like, oh, whatever. So that's really important, I think, just to get the word out there, and I think it definitely accomplished that. We were a fan of it.
And of course, FAA was trying to cover all facets of the drone industry. It wasn't just recreational or hobbyist, it was commercial, the safety case across the board.
Yeah, every day highlighted something different, which was really cool. So
Yeah, I think the education was just Saturday or something, right? The younger group was just on the weekend, and then it was
Each
like,
day had a
SEAM
theme.
Enterprise.
Yeah.
yeah.
Josh, any thoughts on on such a
Yeah.
campaign week?
Yeah, we had a great time during the campaign week. We're fortunate we have a location called Edgewater Air Park, and every Thursday and Friday we have different themes. That Thursday and Friday we did the same thing we always do. We actually had people come out that never had been exposed to the hobby, and they come out and we have a whole line of airplanes, and we teach them for free. And this isn't just adults, this is kids, young and old alike. And then we tell them, come out the next day and we'll teach you some more, but bring the whole family. And then what oftentimes we would do is we'd have a family-centric activity, whether it was a bonfire, a movie under the stars, live music. And what we noticed really quickly was when we started this early on, when we opened the doors of Edgewater, you would have 1 or 2 people come in the beginning of the year. And then those people would bring their friends back. And now, every Thursday and Friday night, we have tons of people coming out, bringing new friends that have never been exposed to the hobby, but then also kind of fellowshipping and gathering around for the family-centric activity. Generally, just trying to communicate the benefits of model aviation to the general public. You can have structured campaigns that go out there, and those are very effective. Or you can bring them through a friend and through an activity that they can adapt to, and then let them observe it through a very beautiful filter. And what we found was we have boys and girls, young and old alike, that started at the very beginning when we started this program, and January 1st, they were building their downstairs build area and still flying in freezing cold weather because they didn't want to wait. They want to kick off the year right. So I think programs for any CBO, for anything, yes, having it focused on a week is really important, but weaving it into the culture of day-to-day life is just as important, and in my opinion, more important.
Thank you, Josh. And hopefully, like the title of this session suggests, you got a sense of the opportunities related to piloting and even a sense of how to get started if you're interested. But now, let me turn to any questions from the audience here. We don't have a microphone, so please stand up and introduce yourself and speak loud so we can hear you up here. I see a hand here. Yes?
Yeah, Spencer Knott. So I've got a Mavic Pro, and probably been flying 2 or 3 years. But a question, I was messing around with drone deploy, that app in the map, you get, I guess, topographical measurements and stuff like that. What are other cool apps that, if you're a avid flyer that you recommend?
Sure, yeah, Drone Deploy is really cool. And really what Drone Deploy did is pulled from Pix4D and made Pix4D more approachable. But I would, if you're into mapping and modeling, Pix4D would be an amazing thing to start to learn. So Drone Deploy tried to like simplify Pix4D and make it so that someone could just out of the box, try and work with it. But once you get more and more advanced, that could be something like, that if you became really skilled at that, you could be charging a lot of money for like someone to have like really, really in-depth maps and models. Pix4D, Pix4D. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Another question up here.
I came a little late, so maybe I already said this, but if you could just give me a summarized version of when you start off with a new drone, what process, get the drone, should get licensed, just whatever that step of that process is.
Sure, Danielle, you
I
want to
can
tackle
take
that
that.
first since you just got a new drone?
I just got mine. It's plug and play. No. So depending on what you get, I mean, if you're just flying for recreational purposes, and if you're, say that again?
I have a video production company, so we for professional.
Okay, so if you want to fly for a company, then you would have to get what we call a remote pilot certificate, and you would operate under the regulatory part known as Part 107, which is basically our regulatory framework for that type of operation. We call it the commercial rule, but it's not technically. But if you want to operate commercially, you have to operate under this part. So if you go to the federal aviation regulations and look under Part 107, it'll spell it out. But essentially what you'd need to do is register your drone. You could do that, on our website for $5, and it's a low burden there. And then you would have to take a written test at a testing location to get this pilot certificate. And on our website, we have a study guide that'll help you pass that test, and it covers things like airspace and pre-flight planning and all that kind of stuff. From there, you've met kind of your first two hurdles, but you might want to call Abby, and like she was saying, I mean, you can go out and teach yourself how to fly, and the equipment is certainly very capable. So depending on the type of flying that you're doing, you might want to seek a little bit of additional training to figure out how to best use your equipment for your business. But if you read through the regulation, you'll see that there are some provisions that, for an example, you have to fly during the day. So if you want to fly at night and take night photography, you would have to apply for a waiver. And that's a process that you can do through our website, which, like all things government, is not necessarily really quick, a really quick process. It can be slow, it can be quick depending on how much information you give us and if you give us your safety case, or it can, take months or weeks. So, and then the other thing I would recommend that you do sooner than later is look at our Before You Fly app or one of our USS Lance providers applications to help you familiarize yourself with the airspace that you plan on operating in and understand what the requirements are for those airspaces. So if you're in a controlled airspace, which is generally within a 5-mile or so proximity of an airport, you would need an airspace authorization, and those come with altitude limitations. And we have published grids on what you can get, quickly. So for an example, if you're within a couple of miles of the runway, in one area, you may be able to get 50 feet, in another 400 feet. So that could really inform the type of operation you want to do or the type of additional authorization you need to seek. And again, you would have to do that through our website, and that's not an instantaneous process. So there is a little bit of kind of forethought before you can get up and flying for your business, but hopefully the barriers aren't too high. But like Abby was saying, I think that there's so many opportunities to really go beyond what the regulations require to be a proficient and competent pilot.
Thank you for your question, and congratulations on your purchase as well.
Yeah.
Abby, did you have a comment as
Yeah.
to follow?
Yeah, I think that covered what you should do. I mean, personally, I like to do things the right way, so that's like a lot of people that are in our classes want someone to like show them how to do things, unless, like if you're someone that figures it out yourself, then you could definitely teach yourself to fly. So a lot of people like to do our basic flight training class where we show you everything about the drone and how to fly, take it out of the box. And then for Part 107, the remote pilot certificate, you definitely could like pass the test by, there's like a bunch of YouTube shows and stuff, but we have an online and in-person class that teaches you the in-person in one day, like everything that you would need to do, and then online it's about 8 hours. And then there's lots of other companies too that have test prep classes. So yeah, that's like a really good place to start and where most of our students start. And then they start, if they're interested in the Trusted Operator program, then a lot of times they'll do like their Top 1 certificate, which is more online classes and teaches you just about like all these different sort of scenarios that you can run into and quizzes you on that kind of stuff. So, I mean, definitely if you wanted to just look at YouTube, you could like start to piece some stuff together, or you could do something more like of an organized training.
I've got one, here's one more question. Yes.
There's a lot of speculation on the future of drone services going all autonomous, and I was wondering what your views are on how that will affect the typical Part 107 pilot looking forward.
Yeah, I think back to that, what I was talking about with the career, like there will still be like a career in drones. Like there'll still be pilots, but they might not be what a pilot is today. There'll still be someone in charge of like these drones. It's not like they're all just going to be flying and like no one has any idea where they are. So there still will be some really high-tech jobs like managing these drone fleets. So this is like a great place to get started. But then a lot of the stuff that we're doing, like anything photography and videography, that probably won't be as autonomous because that's more of a art.
The enterprise side of things where it's probably going to go more autonomous. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. So us as a company, we're starting to prepare for that and starting to, we're doing a lot more consulting and a lot more like getting companies set up for autonomy. And it will go that way. So it's a question of what will happen with the service providers. I know a lot of like the insurance companies right now, they are all working towards someone just pressing a button out, like and just standing there and they're the remote pilot and the drone does the whole job autonomously, which of course would be great for any business, but the drone operator still has to stand there and know what to do in an emergency. But as our chief curriculum developer, she was the one that built the curriculum for the Navy's like $5 million drone, and that's totally autonomous, but they are trained, like she says, an insane amount because you're not training for the 99% of the time that things go perfectly, you're training for the 1% that it doesn't go right, because if you've never flown it before and it's autonomously flying around, you have no idea, and then that doesn't go right, like there's no chance of you trying to save it. So that's what our position is. It will be interesting for service providers. I think they'll have to adapt too, and I do think there will still be opportunities. Honestly, I think it will be even harder for someone just getting started to like even understand those opportunities versus someone who's been doing it for a while can like slowly shift over there.
Thank you. Well, we have time for one final question and some final thoughts down the row here. Let me ask this, we're at the beginning of a new year. What one professional development or regulatory development would you like to see happen before the end of this year? And we'll start with you, Josh.
All right. That's a really great question. You've heard me kind of go back and back over and over again about how flight test is about overcoming hurdles. One thing, and this is, I guess, where the optimism starts or stops. I'd like to see a very simple way to bring compliance to the newest regulations under 349. Many of them are very easy to understand. CBOs, I can understand that. Knowledge-based test, I buy into that. It's really important for people to understand how to properly operate a drone safely or a recreational model aircraft. 400-foot altitude, I can understand the spirit behind it. But one thing that really concerns me, and that would be a very big roadblock to being able to go into those schools, being able to engage those families just starting in aviation, is clarity on remote ID. It's really important in 2020, in my opinion, that we develop a system that gives many different paths to remote ID so they're not burdensome, whether it's the cost of putting equipment on your plane, the cost of a service, the technology that you have to purchase, or just even communicating in a way that people can buy in and implement it. We need to make sure that it is something that is shared and people understand the spirit behind it and also how they could do it, and that the technology that comes doesn't build a barrier. Because my concern is if remote ID goes the wrong direction, we're not going to have 3,000 students in the USA taking in aviation and becoming passionate. That's going to turn into possibly thousands of people that aren't going to be looking to Abby to become professional pilots, or people that are going to grow to use our airspace to become career pilots in the general aviation world. You're not going to have the social benefits of flight in the home, where parents are connecting with their children and encouraging each other. This is the one thing out of all the regulation in 349 that really frankly rattles me the most, because I can't communicate it. I can't give a good definitive answer on how it's going to be complied, and I can't encourage people that it's not going to impact them in a negative way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby?
Yeah, I might be dreaming big that it might be this year, but we're really excited about whenever Beyond Visual Line of Sight rules come out and are more openly sort of growing the industry in that way. I know you could get a waiver now, and it's something that a lot of companies are like sort of starting to work on, but that's definitely a big barrier that we've seen with our like enterprise clients, is that they sort of are like, oh, maybe we'll just wait for Beyond Visual Line of Sight. So we're excited for that, because we think even if they're doing missions that aren't Beyond Visual Line of Sight, it would still open up the market more for us.
Anna?
So for AMA, something that we're really looking forward to is that CBO recognition. So that's something that we're excited for, and hopefully we can get moving forward in 2020. But going off of what Josh said about remote ID, I think it's really important to take into account that we need to figure out a way for recreational purposes that everybody can comply in an easy way to make it simple for them. So.
Thank you. And Danielle,
So,
all the rules we're going to get before the end.
Remote ID is the topic of the hour and the week and our time. It's certainly a really important rule, and I know that there was a lot of anticipation for it, and maybe some consternation now. So my hope for 2020 would be that we field some really good substantive quality comments, that the FAA is able to consider those and implement a rule that makes sense for everyone. And it would be nice to have that rule finalized in 2020, but as we were just talking, I think it's more important to get it right. But wouldn't it be great to get it right and quickly? So I know it's a big hope, but I think remote ID is the founding principle on UTM and getting us to routine Beyond Visual Line of Sight, and ops over people and all these other things. So we really got to figure out remote ID in a way that's going to work for everybody.
You've been a great panel. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much. Please join me in applause for our panel here.
Thank you very much for this.
Absolutely.